Okay, thank you. Sean, your side?
Okay, so would somebody from the Secret Handshake group, on my side, yes.
Check. Okay. Hi, my name is Rizky, and our group wants to share our findings about the characteristics of good abstract for international publications. The main characteristic is a brief and understandable, and then reflect on what we want to search. Yeah, that's all for us.
Brief and understandable. Lovely. Yes, fabulous. On this side, do we have a volunteer? Oh.
For me, it's same with him. It's brief, short, and understandable, and having certain format for certain, any institution has a different format, and I don't know about that. And having clear method and solution and that abstract and reference at the least.
Wonderful, thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, so our next slide is exactly about that. Did you want to add?
Hello, my name is Sana. I'm a participant of this group. Actually, what are the characteristics of a good abstract for international publication? This is an abstract that have elements of abstract that's already mentioned in the second time. So that's basically have to consist of background, objective, and also methodologies, result, and conclusion. But this depends on the requirements of the journal itself. Okay, thank you.
Exactly, good.
Yeah, very good,
All right,
very good.
We'll talk about that.
So you guys are the experts. That's why we wanted to ask from you. You are the experts. And when we asked these 3 questions and your groups answered the questions, you pretty much had the answers correct. What are the features of a good abstract? Well, what we need to know about abstracts, you already know what we need to tell you. We know that it's a mini text. It's a summary of the topic, a summary of the methodology, and the main findings. Think of it as an elevator conversation. Casey, what's an elevator conversation?
Let's model.
Okay. So when you're in an elevator, you get into the elevator, the door's open, you hit the number, okay. You're waiting. Oh, what's your name?
I'm Casey. What's your name?
Oh, my name is Sean. Where are you from?
I'm from Florida. Where are you from?
Oh, I'm from America. I'm from Delaware.
Oh,
That's
wow.
great. Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
What are you doing in Indonesia?
Oh, I'm a teacher here.
Bing.
Oh,
And so the
one more
elevator's
time.
ride is over, right? But you had enough time to give a little bit of information to the person in your elevator conversation. So think of the mini text feature of an abstract as your elevator conversation for your research, right? For the experiment that you have done, for the study you are conducting, it is your elevator pitch. It is your elevator speech. We can also see these as screening devices. Why would we need a screening device?
Right, yeah, millions of research papers are written each year. So when researchers are looking for an article to use, they're going to quickly skim the text and look for keywords. So they need to figure out, does this give me enough information so I know is this good enough for my research?
Yeah. I know everybody in this room is in the same situation as us. When we are doing our own research, when we're compiling research for a literature review, we read through the abstract first to see if we need to continue to read, because we might have a 60 or 90-page research article to read through for our literature review, and we don't have the time to read that for all of the articles we're using, so we use the abstract as a way to skim and scan through the information that we find to be relevant. So it's important for you as the writer to include the mini text, the summary of your findings, of your methodology, of the topic, so that way when somebody is reading through your abstract, they can use it for their research, or if you're submitting it for publication, it can be accepted because it pretty much is accurate towards the paper you are writing. Another thing we use an abstract as a roadmap or a preview for the readers. So it gives you, as the writer, the opportunity to let your reader understand what they will see in the order as it appears in the research paper. So when you are compiling your abstract, you want to make sure you put it in the sequential order that would be in your research paper. So that way, when somebody is reading your research paper, they know in the areas to look for the methodology, for the findings, for the information that they need to use for their reviews. And the last one, it also assists journal reviewers and editors to know what to look for in your paper to see if it would fit their journal. Because many people want to and need to get their papers published. I know I want to get many papers published in the future, now and in the future, and so I need to have a strong abstract to submit for publication, so that way, when I'm doing the abstract and I send it into the reviewer, the editor and the board of reviewers can accept my journal article. But in order for them to accept the journal article, first they need to accept my abstract. Yeah. So how long should an abstract be? Here, this is just a little bit of research from Orasan in 2011, who compiled an analysis of the different types of fields and how long an abstract was for those fields. On average, an abstract had about 7.4 sentences, so 7 or 8 sentences on average. But each field may have different requirements. So if you can find the field that you're in on this list, and if not, you can find in the journal review when you're trying to apply for the journal, they will tell you how long you should, usually characters or sentence length. But on average, if you're in the computer sciences, you're looking at about 9.6, so closer towards 10 sentences with about 232 words in your abstract. But if you do, like for me, I'm in linguistics, I'm writing about 5.8, maybe 6 sentences with 150 words. So on average, think about trying to do 175 words with about 7.4, 8 sentences really on average. But as we will learn in this workshop, when you are submitting, you have to submit to certain guidelines, and each guideline might be different, right? One journal, if you're trying to take one paper and submit it to 3 different journals, one journal might ask for 5 sentences, another might ask for 8 sentences, and another might ask for 10 sentences, right? It depends on the journal and what they're asking for in the abstract. So what you need to do is be able to tailor your abstract to fit many different journals. And then let's talk a little bit about the linguistic features. So we know about the sentence length, right? On average, 7.4 sentences. But when you're writing your abstract, there's certain linguistic features you need to use. There was some research done in 1985 where they analyzed a wide range of abstracts from a variety of different fields and came up with about 5 simple guidelines towards what most people were using. The first thing most people were using were full sentences. So we weren't writing phrases, we weren't having incomplete thoughts, but full sentences. And that seems obvious, but at the same time, maybe it's not obvious. Maybe it's not obvious for some people to write in a full sentence. On average, most people use the past tense in the abstract. Now, some fields, and we will talk about this, can shift from past tense to the present tense for certain effects, but mostly if you're going to write an abstract, you would write about it in the past tense. You would also use impersonal passive. Impersonal passive, something like, it is believed that, right? It is believed that traffic jams can be caused by poor infrastructure, right? Something along those lines could be used in an abstract. So the impersonal passive. You would not want to put any negatives in your abstract. So avoid using negation in your writing for the abstract. Now, this doesn't necessarily apply for the research paper, but for the abstract itself. And I heard this over here in my group when we were discussing the features for international publication, was that you want to use clear language that can be understood by a wide audience. So you do not want to use abbreviation. You do not want to use jargon. You do not want to use symbols or other language shortcuts that could lead to confusion. So you do want to be explicit as possible when you are writing your abstract, because it's not just going to be the people in your particular field that are reading the abstract, but people from all over different fields and different parts of the world will be reading your abstract, because hopefully, if you get published, you will be in an international journal that will be used in databases all over, and people will be reading your research. Now, we talked about the past tense in the previous slide. Most of the time you are using the past tense. However, you can shift to the present tense, and there are more physical sciences like astrophysics and chemistry. Scientists in those fields do tend to use the present tense more because they want to show contemporary relevance. They want to show that the research they are using is something that is modern and useful contemporarily, and not something that was studied before. So it does create liveliness. It makes the research fresh and alive if you use present tense. But that's usually more in the physical sciences and not so much in the social sciences. And at the same time, in the physical sciences, like physicians and chemists, so if this applies to you, you could use strong personal stances in your research. We believe, right? We show, we argue, we conclude. It's okay to use a strong personal stance in some fields. So it's a little confusing. It depends on where your field is. It depends on the requirements of the journal in order to write a strong abstract. But keep this in mind. Keep in mind sentence length for your field. Keep in mind the requirements from the journal for peer review. And keep in mind the language that you need to use.
Okay, now we're going to look at some examples of a guideline for an abstract.
So, as I was saying just then, when you are submitting to a journal article, or you're submitting a journal article for publication to a journal, you have to go through some guidelines, some submission guidelines. And this is just one example of a guideline, but each guide that you will use, each journal you will use, will have their own requirements. I'm sure you've experienced that already if you've published and you've tried to submit your articles. This one just comes from the U.S. Department of Energy, and there are a few things that they're looking for, but you can read this later on your own, but I just want to highlight some of the things that they're looking for. So they want all the abstracts that are submitted to meet the Department of Energy Quality Mission Science criteria. So there's a particular mission that DOE has, and they want to make sure your research and your abstract fits their mission. So what should you do if you don't know the mission of DOE and you want to submit an article for publication for their journal? What should you do? What would you do, Casey, if you didn't know what the mission was?
Google it.
Yeah, Google it, right? Use Uncle Google or Grandpa Google at this point.
So sorry to interrupt, but before we were looking at the table where it showed the sentence length and maybe the words, here this has, if you notice at the bottom, it has characters. Okay, so you're not counting words, you're not counting sentences, so you have to be very careful because your abstract can be declined or accepted depending on if you followed the directions. So be sure to read everything thoroughly.
Yeah, and so this is just one example. We're not going to go into it in too much detail. These are published and available. This presentation is available for you to review in the future. And as you go through your fields, you will find your own submission guidelines, and you're aware of submission guidelines. But let's talk about maybe why an abstract might not be accepted.
Yeah, these are the top 10 for nursing, but I believe they can be applied to pretty much every field. So the title does not summarize the content. Okay, clearly, yeah, if you don't have a clear title that represents your abstract, it's probably not going to be accepted. The research question or purpose is not clear or is not congruent with methods. The methods are not aligned with the results, so you have the methods, but they don't match your results clearly. The results section fails to report results, so maybe you have results, but they're not very clear. The importance or significance of the topic to nursing or education or biology, whatever your field is. So is this something significant? Is this something that can be used today? So if it's not very important or significant to today, you should rethink a different topic. Okay, next, conclusions are not supported by the data. So you have great data, but your conclusion at the end doesn't represent what you're telling them in the beginning. Implications for nursing research, practice, or education are not supported by results. So again, you need to make sure everything matches and transitions well with what you're representing. The template headings are missing. Okay, make sure you have your title, everything there. Keywords, grammatical errors. Did you spell things correctly? Are you in the correct tense? Or did you write in the past tense? Present tense, make sure you have somebody proofread along with you. And jargon. Jargon is confusing or undefined. So we are all in different fields. Abstract should appeal to everybody. Anybody should be able to pick it up and understand, get the gist of it. So be careful with jargon. Try to make it clear for everybody. Now we're going. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, now we're going to look at two abstracts. One is accepted and one is rejected, and you will be the judge. Okay, so we have two here, and we have provided copies. If you do not have a copy of this, work with your partner, see who does have one, and you will be the judge based on what we just discussed. So you need to select the one that's accepted and the one that was rejected.